Russian anti-corruption blogger Alexei Navalny has been handed a 5-year jail sentence for embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from a state enterprise. Now, he was immediately arrested after the verdict and led from the dock in handcuffs. In a moment, RT's Egor Piskunov on the reaction to the ruling in central Moscow. But first, RT's Irina Galushko reporting from outside the courthouse.
Oh, so the day that came as a heartbreak to Navalny's supporters. A man who has positioned himself as an activist against corruption in Russia has actually been indicted on corruption charges. He is looking at 5 years in prison for apparently embezzling up to $500,000 in timber schemes, machinations in the region of Kirov. But you have to understand that the maximum penalty for the type of crime that Alexei Navalny was convicted of is 10 years in prison. Prosecutor was asking for 6. Now, the judge has built his judgment on the testimony from the witnesses. This is not the first criminal case that was started against him. Yet Alexei Navalny was a man who has portrayed himself as a person who is adamantly against corruption in the country. He has actually been a blogger who is trying to expose several rather large anti-corruption schemes in Russia. But of course, he will have to now perhaps not only to serve a prison sentence, but also pay a hefty fine of roughly $30,000. So right now, Alexei Navalny is in one of the preliminary confinement offices here in Kirov.
And Igor, on to you now. Irina had mentioned Mr. Navalny's supporters in the city of Kirov. I'm curious, what's been the reaction from supporters of Navalny in Moscow and where you are?
Well, news about Navalny's verdict spread very quickly, basically exploding the internet. Several groups have been organized even before the verdict was announced, calling for Navalny's supporters to take part in protest rallies in Moscow and over 20 other cities across Russia. Navalny himself has called the same on his supporters in his Twitter account, and well, thousands of people have already confirmed in social networks in these groups that they are planning to take to the streets later on Thursday, both in Moscow and in over 20 other cities in the country. It's needed to say that Navalny gained lots of supporters even before the wave of protests 2 years ago through these online anti-corruption projects. The other part of the controversy around him is his open sympathy to the Russian nationalists. And even though the opposition is still not unified, he's surely to be considered one of the leaders of the movement. But if we look at the supporters, his supporters on a nationwide scale, when it comes to roughly 140 million Russian citizens, then Navalny's support there is much less than it comes to the online community, since a recent poll by Levada Center revealed that only around 10% of Russian citizens even followed the criminal case around him.
And Irina, back to you. Where does this sentence, this verdict, leave Mr. Navalny in terms of his political ambitions?
Navalny did have a lot of political ambition. In fact, some people were looking at him as one of the main opposition figures who could possibly play a very important role in Russia's political future or in Russia's political life. Well, Navalny has started off by putting his name on the ballot to run for Moscow mayor. The elections are due to take place in September, and just yesterday, Navalny's name appeared as an official contender for that post. However, the latest news that we're getting from Navalny's election camp is that it was agreed before the verdict was read that if Navalny should get a prison term, that he will automatically withdraw his candidacy. And that is what his election camp has stated right after the verdict was read here in Kirov today. Navalny's lawyers have 10 days to make an appeal, and they have already stated that they're planning on doing that before the verdict has even been announced here in Kirov.